When last I left you, we were talking about the presidency of Thomas Jefferson and how we describe it as consistently inconsistent. And there's a variety of things that he does that really don't add up to his way of thinking, his philosophy on how government should operate. We talked about several examples, the latest of which being the Louisiana Purchase, And in the long run, the Louisiana Purchase greatly expanded the fortunes of the United States, but it also greatly expands the power of the federal government. What does Thomas Jefferson think about expanding the power of the federal government? He doesn't like it. He likes small federal government. He's a states' rights kind of guy. Another example of how he's consistently inconsistent. In the short term, right initially when it was purchased, the vast expanse of the territory and the feeble reach of our federal government to try to control it raised some scary thoughts in a lot of people's minds. You have this massive, vast landscape that we just tacked onto our country when we had territory east of it that was still just territory. Who's in charge over there? Who's in charge if you lived in present day Missouri in 1804? Who's in charge there? Nobody, really. I'm not going to say it's like lawlessness, but it kind of is lawlessness, all right? I'm not saying it's aliens, but it's aliens. So that raises some pretty particularly hairy questions for how the United States is going to go from being unorganized to organized. Now, enter this man, Aaron Burr. Aaron Burr. He was the vice president of the United States during Thomas Jefferson's first term. And he plays a pretty significant role in provoking a lot of fear in people, particularly out in the West. Because of his role in provoking fear and spreading dangerous ideas, he was dropped from Jefferson's cabinet in Jefferson's second term. Jefferson basically, he doesn't really fire him, he just doesn't rehire him in the second term. But that doesn't mean Aaron Burr just disappears and goes away. Aaron Burr joined with a group of Federalist extremists. And he begins to hatch a plot to make the United States of America split. He wants to create a new country within the United States. And the part of America that he wants to secede is New England and New York. You don't think about that. When you think about states seceding from the Union, you think about the South. Aaron Burr tried to get New England and New York to do it in 1805. Now, Alexander Hamilton, a proud New Yorker, even though he's no friend to Thomas Jefferson by any means, they completely disagree on everything politically. This guy, Aaron Burr, who's also a Federalist, is trying to destroy our country and create conspiracies to cripple our government. And Alexander Hamilton exposes Aaron Burr's conspiracy and foils it, puts an end to it, stops it. How do you think Aaron Burr felt about that? Dang you, Alex. You meddlesome kid. If it weren't for you, I could have had my own country. And so Aaron Burr challenges Alexander Hamilton to a duel. We don't have duels anymore. But at this time, even though they were illegal, they were still fairly common. Do you guys know what a duel is?
One dies.
Say it again?
One dies. One
But not always. Not always. Yeah, it's a way of settling a disagreement through gun use, violence. the method in which the duel take place varied depending upon the circumstance, but essentially you stand a distance away from each other, not like hiding or anything. You stand up straight and tall, and you take turns shooting at each other with pistols. Now, obviously this was illegal. This is an illegal practice, and it was illegal in several states. And Alexander Hamilton really didn't even want to participate in it, but he felt like his honor was at stake. So he met Aaron Burr's challenge, and then went to the place where the duel was supposed to take place. And then he showed up, and then when it was his time to shoot, he shoots his pistol off up in the air. Aaron Burr says, "Bad move, Alex." Boom, shoots him right in the head. In doing so, he blows out probably the brightest brain in our nation. Because we needed Alexander Hamilton. And, he was one of our great hopes for effective leadership. So, needless to say, Aaron Burr's political career is as dead as Alexander Hamilton. And he turns his gaze out to the west, into this newly unoccupied, largely unoccupied territory we recently just acquired. I mean, he's a murderer, right? Yeah, he shot somebody. He's a murderer, okay? So he meets up with a guy named General James Wilkinson. And James Wilkinson is the military governor of the Louisiana Territory. So he's been put in place to oversee this new territory. And James Wilkinson is by no means a man of high character. When Aaron Burr meets up with him, he tries to convince Wilkinson that the western part of the United States should secede from the Union, and we should create a new country in the western part. And then we should even invade into Spanish Mexico and Florida. Because this guy, this James Wilkinson, he's a military leader. He has command of troops. He could do it. But when Wilkinson and Burr's plan gets exposed again, when Thomas Jefferson learns of it, Aaron Burr is arrested. What's the crime? Treason. In the eyes of the government, treason's worse than murder. It's the worst crime you can commit. Betraying your country. So Aaron Burr is arrested and tried for treason. He has a trial. His trial takes place in the highest courts. And which was the United States Supreme Court, and Chief Justice John Marshall, still there, insisted that he could not be found guilty because it requires overt acts of treason. Planning to commit treason, is that treason? Like if I plan to kill somebody but never kill somebody, am I a murderer? And so you can kind of see the point here. You're like, you can't, it's not against the law to have thoughts. It's actions that are punishable by law. So even though Aaron Burr obviously and certainly had treasonous intentions, he gets off. He doesn't face any consequences. So now Aaron Burr is, he's kind of alienated himself with the United States government. He can't go back to New England. In the West, he's trying to get all kinds of stuff to people to secede from America. He's like a thorn in the government side. He's causing all kinds of problems. So when Aaron Burr is acquitted of treason, he goes to Europe. And he meets up with basically the commander of Europe, the military dictator of France. What's his name? Napoleon. He was found not guilty. He was acquitted. And so he goes and meets up with Napoleon and urges Napoleon, who is at war currently at that time with Great Britain. And he urges Napoleon, he's like, Napoleon, leave those British people alone. The real enemy is the United States. You should ally yourself with Great Britain and go invade the United States and conquer them. Tries to get Napoleon to make nice with the British and launch a joint invasion of America.
To make what with the British?
Make nice. Launch a joint invasion of America. This Aaron Burr guy, not the best American. He was vice president of the United States. He's becoming the first vice president to ever shoot someone, but not the last.
Who was the last?
Dick Cheney.
Who?
Dick Cheney.
Don't even know who.
He was vice president under George W. Bush. What year were you born?
2006.
Okay. Yeah. He was president, or he was vice president when you were born.
Well, I was.
He shot somebody in the face while he was hunting. It wasn't on purpose.
So did he get in
Did
trouble?
Aaron Burr just kill somebody and he doesn't get like in trouble for murdering someone?
Aaron Burr.
No, because it was a duel, and dueling was seen a little differently. Even though it was illegal, it was just kind of he just kind of fled. He just got left.
He was a part of most duels right in this time.
I mean, duels were not uncommon, honestly.
I know, but he seems like he was a part of a lot of them. Like he wasn't involved, but he was on the side.
I got you. He was definitely involved in a lot of problems.
Yeah.
I mean, he killed Alexander Hamilton, tries to get New England and New York to secede from the Union. That doesn't work. Goes to the West, tries to create a new country out West by invading Spain and like seceding from the United States. That doesn't work. Tries to instigate Napoleon into invading the United States. It's a bad guy.
He sounds kind of crazy.
A little bit.
Like, if Alexander Hamilton was worried about his honor, why would he shoot at this guy?
Why wouldn't he shoot at this guy?
Why would he? Like, literally, that's just,
All right.
that's literally just like.
This is like the dueling is the ultimate in the macho bravado. Like, here I am. I'm going to let you. You can shoot at me first. I'm that macho. Now Alexander Hamilton's like, I'm just going to shoot off in the air.
But he died.
Yeah, he got shot in the
He
head.
lost.
Yeah,
Aaron was like, I don't
yeah.
care.
But he kept his honor, I guess.
No, he didn't.
It's
He
a
lost.
different code then. Different code.
So he lost.
All right, so all of this stuff collectively, you put it together, it demonstrates that it's one thing for the United States to have this enormous tract of land. It's one thing to own it. It is another thing altogether for it to be governed effectively. So we got a long way to go. And in order for us to do that, what has to happen to the power of the federal government? It has to get stronger and expand. Okay? Okay. So Aaron Burr, pretty interesting character in American history. All right. Now, all the while, all through Washington's presidency, all through Adams' presidency, and now throughout Jefferson's presidency, we're trying to butt out of foreign affairs. Like, we're trying to take a side with those two foreign powers that are always at odds with each other. Who are we trying to stay neutral between? France and Great Britain. Okay? Now, in the election of 1804, which is Jefferson's second term, Jefferson is triumphantly reelected. Wins fairly easily, 162 to 14.
Who was running against?
His name was Charles Pinckney. You ever heard Pinckney's Treaty?
No.
That guy. So people are pretty satisfied with the job of Jefferson up to this point. I mean, he does double the size of our nation. But the laurels of Jefferson's first administration soon wither under the blast of several new storms. Most of this storm comes from Europe. Not like literal weather, though, guys. Okay. So, Napoleon is a particular problem for Jefferson. After unloading Louisiana to America in 1803, Napoleon deliberately provokes the renewal of his war against Great Britain. And an awesome conflict between Great Britain and France rages for 11 years. Very violent fighting in Europe. All right. all the while, America's like, we're not picking a side. We're trying to stay neutral. But is it even really possible to stay neutral? Because are we involved in Europe at all? Like in any way? Yeah, we do trade because we have a lot of resources and we want to trade with both of them. In doing so, that puts us in an awkward position. Do the British want us to trade with the French?
No.
What happens when they come across our ships bound for France?
They pirate them.
They do stuff, yeah, they pirate them. Pirate, if that's a verb. Yeah. All right. What about the French? When they see American ships headed for England with supplies, they pirate them as well. Okay? So this puts America in a pretty awkward position. And one of the things that they did, those powerful nations in Europe did, is they practiced. It's called impressment. Do you guys know what impressment means? All right, whenever they would capture an American merchant vessel, they would impress the sailors on it. Does that mean they would like do a little dance to try to make them clap? No, it would mean they would force them into being like they would force them into the navy of their country. Like, okay, you were on this boat, which was a merchant vessel. You are now being forced to go to this boat and work in the Queen's or King's Navy. Impressment, the forcible enlistment of sailors. And that's not a new idea. It had been used by the British and French for over 4 centuries. But over time, some 6,000 American citizens were impressed by these pirate man-stealers. In just 3 years. 6,000 Americans. Yes, come in.
Do you have my report card?
You have a mask?
In my class.
Okay. You know you have to wear a mask, right?
Yes.
Okay. Did you get it Friday?
No. I was on a field trip. So
Here it is.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. What was I talking about? Impressment, pirates. Yeah. I want you to imagine 6,000 Americans like being captured and forced to work in somebody else's military today. Think that would fly today? Think it's gonna fly back then? You think it's gonna fly? Think that's cool with America? Oh, you could take our American citizens and just force them to work in your military. No big deal. No, that's not cool at all. Okay? So, Britain was the biggest offender in this. Britain was the worst for capturing American citizens. Okay? Now, you're Thomas Jefferson. What is the most precious thing to be able to do is to stay out of war. That is we must maintain our neutrality. However, we cannot abide and allow for Americans to be captured and to be forced into labor, basically made slaves, pirate slaves.
They weren't paid.
No, they were forced.
They were just kidnapped, basically.
Yes, and forced to work on a boat. So, you have to stay. So Thomas Jefferson's plan, well, what would you do? You're president of the United States.
Stop trading with both countries.
That's what he does. No more ships out going anywhere, guys. It's called an embargo. Completely cuts off trade. If our people are not out in the ocean, they're not stealing us. And we're staying out of war. That's his idea. That if America voluntarily cut off exports, then the powers that are offending us, England and France, would be forced to respect us because they're not getting American products anymore either. So this embargo, it's called the Embargo Act of 1807, is when it occurs. And it rigorously forbids the export of all goods from the United States, no matter in what ship. Didn't matter if it was an American ship or if the French brought a ship over here and brought it and took the stuff back. No more trade. What's his hope? What's Jefferson's hope to happen here?
If we get our people back,
Okay, maybe. What else? That's a good guess.
that we don't start a war.
We don't want to start a war. Does he want to cut off trade for the United States forever? No. He wants to peacefully coerce England and France to kind of stop their nonsense and start to treat us with, respect. They honor our rights. That we're a neutral nation. Does it happen? No. What does happen as a result?
They get mad.
Okay. Well, just what does it? The very nature of the embargo does what? What happens to our economy? It goes in the toilet, if there were toilets then. It goes away. It's bad. It's horrible. America's economy staggered under the effect of this embargo. Who do you think was most particularly affected by it?
People that worked in the ports.
Yeah. And where are those mostly located? In the north. All right. So New England's once bustling harbors and docks that had once, you've been booming, were now deserted, launching thousands of Americans directly into unemployment overnight. We don't need to build ships anymore. Nobody's shipping. All those goods and raw materials, all the stuff you need for the shipping industry, and all the things that we were shipping, is done. It's dried up. It's gone. It didn't just affect the North. It also affects the South. What country on earth was the most powerful in factories and manufacturing? What? Britain. They had the most factories. And the thing that they had the most of is textile factories. You guys know what textile is? Cloth. They made cloth, all right? But in order to make cloth, you got to have things like cotton. Where are they going to get cotton from? The American South. And the American South and all of the harbors there started to pile up with unexportable cotton and grain and tobacco, all the things that we used to sell. So it seemed to a lot of American citizens that Jefferson's not waging war on Europe. He's waging war on American citizens. Because people are starving, they're hungry, they can't work. So the embargo was extremely hated by Americans really throughout the North and the South. Farmers, when there's a surplus of all this grain and tobacco and cotton, what happens to the price of it? It plummets. It goes down. So, it really hurt Thomas Jefferson when Americans started to be like, we want King George III back. We want to go back to that. Thomas Jefferson, you're horrible. That really hurt his feelings. Okay, so people in the North, there was talk of secession, seceding from the United States and creating a new country, particularly in New England, where they were hardest hit.
Was Aaron Burr still alive?
Aaron Burr was in Europe.
So was he like, oh yeah, here it goes?
He was not. He wanted to have his own country. So
He didn't care if America seceded as long as he wasn't ruling it?
yeah, he didn't want to. As long as he wanted to be a part of it, yeah, he would want to be in charge. Okay, so this embargo act that it lasts for a couple years, but it really extends beyond that. It was repealed. Do you guys know what repealed means? Yeah, taken away in March of 1809, just 3 days before Thomas Jefferson's last day in office. But it's not really taken away. Like, all right, the Embargo Act is repealed on March 1st, 1809. And in its place, it is replaced with something. It's called the Non-Intercourse Act. Non-Intercourse Act. What the Non-Intercourse Act does is it says America can do trade with any country on earth except Britain and France. Who are the ones we want to trade with the most? Britain and France. They're the ones with money.
So who did we trade with?
We were allowed to trade with anyone else except Britain and France.
But who did we trade with?
Anyone else we could. Spain. Anyone. Russia. Anyone. Just not Britain and France.
Russia was a country at this point?
Oh, yeah.
Were they powerful?
They were. They were very powerful. Okay, so the Non-Intercourse Act formally reopens trade to the world except for Britain and France. So it's kind of a watered-down embargo. It's still not great. And this happens in March of 1809. So why do you think this embargo, Jefferson's hopeful plan to keep America out of war, why do you think it fails after just 15 months? It doesn't last very long, 15 months.
We needed money.
Yeah, we did. We were in bad shape military or economically. One of the things that Jefferson thought the embargo would do is he thought in his mind Britain and France would come crawling back on their knees, be like, "Oh, please, America, we need your stuff so bad. We can't make it without you." And that didn't happen. That didn't happen. British people, when it comes to grit, are a lot like Americans used to be. Like, able to withstand some hardship. Okay? So, first of all, Thomas Jefferson underestimates the bulldog determination of Great Britain. All right? So, it just so happened in that time, Great Britain had a bumper crop of grain that year. You guys know what that means to have a bumper crop?
A lot?
Yeah, the overabundance. And so all the grain that they would normally be importing from America didn't need it anyway because they were able to sustain themselves with grain. Also, places in like Latin America, they were able to get goods from them. No need to count on America. So do you think Americans still smuggled and stuff?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely, they still smuggled. And guess what the French and the British would do whenever they would see these American smuggling ships?
Impress them?
Yeah, capture them and like punish them. So they would seize American ships, steal their cargo, and then like Napoleon would be like, "Hey, Tom, we're just helping you enforce your embargo. We're just helping you out, Tom." Kind of a slap in the face. Like, "Hey, these guys are Americans. I thought you said they weren't allowed to be over here, Tom. We're doing you a favor." So they just steal the cargo and impress the sailors. Say, "They're getting their punishment, Tom. Don't worry about it. I'm taking care of it for you. Helping you enforce your embargo act." Kind of a slap in the face. Also, Thomas Jefferson clearly miscalculated the unpopularity of the Embargo Act and its detriment to American society.
Was it his most unpopular act?
I would definitely say that it was. Thomas Jefferson was pretty hated by the end of his second term. Loved in his first term. Hey, Louisiana Purchase. Oh, that's awesome. Great. Cool. Then this. The embargo was bad. It was bad. Okay? All right, so, I mean, you guys know, you've lived through it economically. Like, when COVID hit and everything shut down, it was bad. People didn't have jobs. People weren't working. It's bad. And we're still struggling to recover. Imagine if the government, like, this is very similar to that, an intentional government shutdown of stopping everything. Okay? So it was rough. Now, this is another example of how Jefferson does more to go against his own philosophy. How does Jefferson feel about America being a big time manufacturing and having factories and banking interests? He doesn't want that. He doesn't want to see wealthy, moneyed people running America. He wants it to be a democracy of the people and farmers and agrarian. Well, if people in the North are no longer able to ship raw materials to England and France, what are they going to do? Are they just going to let these raw materials go to waste?
No.
Several American entrepreneurs build factories so that they themselves can manufacture the goods. The Embargo Act does more to increase American manufacturing and build American factories than anything else Thomas Jefferson could have done, making America a more powerful manufacturing company. The exact opposite of what Thomas Jefferson wants America to be. So old factories were renewed and new ones were built. And the real foundations of America's industrial might were laid directly as a result of the Embargo Act. Thomas Jefferson, a big-time critic of factories and factory life, he unwittingly does more for American manufacturing than Alexander Hamilton ever dreamed of doing.
What do you think Hamilton would be like if he was still alive, like when Thomas Jefferson did this?
He would be like, he would have hated the embargo, but he would have loved what would have come out of it. So, Thomas Jefferson, following the precedent set by Washington and then later by Washington, he leaves the presidency after 2 terms. John Adams only served 1 because he lost to Jefferson. He called the office of the presidency a splendid misery. Splendid misery. And I'm not saying he chose his successor, because that's not how it works in American government. There was an election. But his friend and fellow Virginian, a quiet, intellectual, and unassuming man named James Madison, wins the election of 1808. You ever heard of James Madison? Yeah. Also a Virginian. He also defeats Charles Pinckney by an electoral college vote of 122 to 47.
So James Madison.
James Madison becomes the 4th president of the United States. James Madison takes the presidential oath of office on March the 4th, 1809, 3 days after the embargo. At the time he's doing this, the awesome conflict in Europe is still raging conflict. Wars all throughout Europe. And America is still largely out of it. We are not in war at all. And that had been the goal of Washington, Adams, and Jefferson. Now, to look at James Madison, he's a tiny little man. Small of stature, light of weight, bald of head, weak of voice. I'm not saying he's a bad leader. I'm just saying that these are his characteristics. Okay? He had a very distinguished career as a legislator. He's known as the father of our Constitution, largely responsible for writing a majority of it. And he is also, just as most presidents are, he's handed a big plate of problems. One of which is the embargo. It was due to expire in 1810. Well, the Non-Intercourse Act it was due to expire. And what he wants to do is he wants to completely, Congress Congress creates this plan called Macon's Bill Number 2. That's what it's called. Macon, like bacon. Macon's Bill Number 2. And what Macon's Bill Number 2 does is it allows the Non-Intercourse Act to expire and reopens American trade with the world, including Britain and France. And another aspect of this bill is that it kind of puts pressure on Britain and France. If either Britain or France continue to impress our sailors, seize our ships, then the embargo would immediately be slapped on that country. What are the implications of this?
They stopped doing it.
What is it?
They stopped being impressed with it.
Okay. Hopefully.
Yeah.
But what happens when we put the embargo on one and not the other?
Just choosing a side.
We've chosen a side. What happens to our neutrality?
Yeah.
No more neutrality. Napoleon sees this as an opportunity. Napoleon is not dumb. He's a very intelligent man. And he basically does all that he can to try to force America into no longer being neutral and to choose his side. But Madison's also a smart man. He knows better than to trust Napoleon. And ultimately, what ends up happening is Napoleon is successful in convincing the American public and the American Congress that he's playing ball, that he's going to do the right thing. He's not. But he does a good job of convincing them, and so the embargo is put on the British, and the British are given 3 months to straighten up and stop seizing our ships and acting right. They do not stop seizing our ships and act right. So American neutrality comes to an end, which ultimately is the first giant step towards war. The war known as what?
The War of 1812.
The War of 1812. You guys know much about the War of 1812?
That's when the national anthem was written.
It is. Anything else?
They burned the White House.
Yeah. Who wins? Who we fight?
Britain.
Mm-hmm. You don't hear much about it. You know why?
We lost.
Because we got our butts kicked. Technically, the war ends in a tie. Technically. But let's be honest, they burned down the White House and the Capitol. Usually when you do that, it's not good for the home team. Okay? And so I think it's a good place to stop. And we'll talk more about that on Wednesday. Tomorrow, bring your Chromebooks because we will do a progress check. Multiple choice questions. The AP Central. Okay.